Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the MCU Ranked review, where every week the three of us review every single Marvel movie in order, then rank them from the best to the worst. I am your host, Hoodie. With me, as always, my co-host, Zero.
Hi.
And for the very first time ever, close personal friend, Kaiser.
Hey.
Alright, so first things first, let me say this right from the beginning. This is not going to be like our monthly anime review show or any other review that goes up on the channel. More so than anything, this is just a podcast. So much more loose, less structured, conversational, etc., etc. This week, to kick off the new series, we went all the way back to the beginning with 2008's Iron Man. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about a little Marvel movie that came out in 2014 that we won't be reviewing, but I like a lot. It's called Big Hero 6. It's it's about this little boy, and he's a very smart kid, and it's about losing his brother and, you know, sort of him growing up and becoming a superhero. And the reason I bring it up is because when that movie came out in 2014, or maybe, I don't know when I got it, maybe 2015, but when I first watched it, I quickly fell in love with that movie. And I think I watched it, in the first couple of days, I watched it at least 4 times. And at this point, I've seen it upwards of 10 plus. And I really love that movie. And I could watch it again and again and again, over and over again. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because just to get a peek behind the curtains, this is our second time trying to record this podcast. So I've seen Iron Man a couple times now. I've rewatched it 4 times in my life, I think. Maybe more, but 4 times I remember. I watched it not when it first came out, but like when it first came to DVD, so sometime around 2009. And I was a little kid at that point. Well, little kid. I was 11, so yeah, a little kid. And you know, it's easy to impress little kids. I thought it was all right. Then I watched it again a couple months ago for Infinity War, so that was in April, and I was honestly really impressed because the reason as I was watching it, I was also, you know, watching someone review it, and they talked really highly of it, and I thought, well, I mean, I'm sure it's good, but I don't really remember it all that much, so how good could it be? But I went back and I watched it. I enjoyed it a lot. Then I watched it again last week when we tried to record this for the first time, and I started seeing some holes. Then I watched it again this morning for this week's attempt at recording the podcast, and man, this it's getting more rough every time.
Yeah, it does not age well.
So yeah, I don't I just want to get that out there. You know, you guys have seen the movie a fair amount at this point too, I imagine. So yeah. I want to put that out there, that my perspective is colored a little bit concerning this movie. And if you had asked me last week, I may have been nicer than I am about the movie right now. Do you guys share similar sentiments?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think overall the movie holds up well, but yeah, this is not a movie I want to be rewatching often.
And okay, but holds up well. I do think it holds up well in terms of like, well, like if it doesn't age in the same sense that like if you revisit, you know, Batman 89, that one doesn't age well because of how old it is.
Right.
This one's still like the CGI looks good, the acting's good, the writing's fine, or you know, fine enough. It's not like super cheesy and it's not like aged poorly in that sense. I just think it's, for whatever reason, it doesn't fare well with multiple rewatches. How do you feel about that, Zero?
Well, this was a fear of mine last week when we realized we had to re-record this, is that, like, because this movie has such a long introductory act, I was a little worried about having to come back and rewatch it again, but honestly, I don't really share the sentiment. I'm not entirely sure why. I've watching it this time felt pretty much the same as watching it last week.
So, okay, you pointed out an interesting thing there. You said that you thought it would be bad because of the long first act, which I think is a fair assessment, but the thing about that is that the first act is what I like about this movie. Right, it's what I consider the best part of this movie is just all of Tony being in that cave with Jensen, and we'll get more into that in a second. But that in general is what I think makes this movie really good. And you're right in the sense that, well, you're right for me in what you thought would happen, even if it didn't happen to you, is that part of the movie that I thought was so good, that I thought was like the saving grace of them, because I think most people could admit that everything with Obadiah staying towards the end isn't all that great, but everything like before that is generally received well, except for when I was rewatching it so many times. Then it started feeling a little slow and started feeling like I just wanted to get it over with. And if the best part of your movie is slowly turning into the all right, let's get this moving part, then you don't have much left. I mean, if I'm waiting for the Obadiah Stane fight, then you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I think part of rewatching these movies over and over again was analyzing them. And I think if you watch any movie over and over again to analyze it, you can pick it apart to the point where it's like, I don't really want to do this anymore.
Yeah, ultimately, I think I don't know if I necessarily call it unfair of us to review it poorly because of having to rewatch it so many times, but I think it just has to be acknowledged that, you know, if you're looking for a review of Iron Man here, at least my perspective is going to be colored by the fact that I've had to rewatch this movie so many times. But okay, let's just go. If you haven't seen the movie, this is basically what it's about. We open up and we're in the back of this military jeep. We got Tony Stark. We got 3 other soldiers, 2 boys, 1 girl. That's important because Tony Stark's a womanizer. They have their little fun. They're just taking pictures all around. Then suddenly a bomb goes off, like a little landmine or whatever. All the soldiers get out, immediately shot to death. They're all brutally murdered.
Yeah, none of them last more than 2 seconds.
Yeah. Don't even remember their names. Tony, like, petrified, like, well, not petrified, he's like terrified. He crawls out of the car. He goes up to the back of the jeep. Something happened. I don't know if he gets shot at this point or something, but a missile lands, like a straight up missile lands on the ground right next to him, has his name plastered right across it. We'll get to this movie later, but the same thing happens ironically with the twins in Age of Ultron. But he sees the missile with his name. It explodes. He's unconscious. His vision fading back and forth. He's sort of like coming in and out. He wakes up again. He's in a cave. There's this guy. I think he's shaving. He looks at his chest. There's a hole in it with some sort of battery attached to a car battery. And he like jumps up. And this sort of imagery kind of stood out to me because it was kind of like, and maybe this is just me, maybe it doesn't play this way for everyone else, but it kind of felt like reminiscent of body horror. I don't know, have you guys ever seen Black Swan?
No.
Me neither.
Okay, well, the movie is about this ballerina, and a lot of it plays with sort of mental going crazy, basically. She's so stressed out about trying to become the best ballerina that she just like starts literally going insane. And a lot of that plays out through sort of like body horror imagery. And I don't know if this played like that for anyone else, but when I saw Tony just like with all of these wires attached to him and like literally attached to a car battery, I felt similar, similar ways about that. Did you guys feel that way at all? It felt like kind of, I don't know if I'd outright say scary, but it evoked a similar feeling to me.
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to like other Marvel movies, I would say that is one of the scenes where you're like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, and I think that sort of floats to a larger point about this movie, which is that this movie, it is very clear. So at this point in the timeline, the MCU has not been bought out by Disney yet. So this movie, I don't know exactly what movie, like at what point it does get bought by Disney, but particularly in this one, it is incredibly noticeable that this is not dark per se, but darker than what we get later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Anyways, he talks to Jensen a little bit, and then I think we flash back at this point. We go back to 36 hours prior, and we're in this award show. We get a huge exposition scene about like who Tony Stark is, about all his past. Excuse me, I had to burp. Okay, we get this huge exposition scene. It's an award show. We see not Don Cheadle, the other guy. He is presenting an award to Tony, but Tony's not there. Obadiah Stane picks up the award. We flash to Tony. Tony's playing craps or whatever, or some shit, and with some women, and then et cetera, et cetera. I'll skip ahead a little bit. Tony leaves with one of the reporters. We get a good feel in this scene. I mean, we've already seen so far that he's sort of like a player. He's sort of, he likes to mess around. But in this scene, it really solidifies that when he's leaving the casino or whatever. This reporter comes in. She's interrogating him about these like military weapons being sold and like how he's literally like responsible for so many deaths. He's responsible for so much war. Hard cut. They're having sex in his penthouse.
Yeah, it was that escalated quickly.
This is an impressive.
We've all been there.
I would. That's very generous, Zero. I think that I remember watching that, and the first time it was like, all right, that's weird, and then like the second and third time it was like, how does that happen? Like,
yeah, I'm more impressed than anything.
Yeah, like. I can't even...
You guys didn't sense that sexual tension. Come on.
All right.
She was like, tell me about how you murdered those children.
All right. So they do it. Next morning, he's MIA. He's gone. And, she's a reporter. She's starting to sneak around. She sets off an alarm. Pot shows up right behind her. She says, I'm taking out the trash. Punches her in the face. Then throws her in her bag. Tosses her out the window.
Yeah, definitely.
And, I forget what happens after here. Do we go downstairs? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Potts goes to see Tony, but I think this is the part of the movie where I was looking around the first time I rewatched it, and it was like, wow, like, the windows and everything, and the panels, and his garage, like, that's really what I noticed. The graphics here are holding up really well. Like, this all still looks good 10 years later,
Remind me, do we see at this point if he's, like, messing around with any, like, holographic stuff, or is that later?
I think we see some of that, yeah.
Because the holographic stuff does really hold up. Now, it's not, like, as bombastic as we, like, in Iron Man 3, he's, like, reconstructing a crime scene and, like, moving elements, and that's, like, really crazy, and we don't get that type of stuff, but, like, just the pure, like, it's a smaller scale level of CG.
Yeah.
That does hold up in this movie. I'd say a lot of and that's why I had to stress earlier, when we say it doesn't age poorly, it's not necessarily in that regard, because it actually does. For a movie that came out 10 years ago, and you compare it to even the older Spider-Man movies, which, to be fair, came out beforehand. The older Spider-Man movies, while they still hold up fairly well, you could see aging in terms of, like, just the quality of, you look at Doc Ock, and he looks good, but he looks a little bit dated. And then you look at Iron Man here, and I'd say Iron Man in this movie, like the Iron Man suit, looks, I don't know if I'd outright say better, but looks comparable and different, but, like, as good, if not better, than
I
Iron
would
Man
say
later.
that overall the Iron Man suit holds up just as well as any other CGI. I definitely didn't I definitely didn't look at it and think, wow, that looks way like it's noticeably worse graphically than in the Avengers movies,
Yeah, I 100% agree. So Pepper Potts goes downstairs. She sees Tony. They talk about some paintings or whatever. Then we go back. We basically skip ahead. He goes on a plane. He demonstrates the new missile that he's selling to the U.S. military. It's called the Jericho. He has this really cool demonstration scene. He has this pretty good quote where he's like, they say the best weapon is one you never need to shoot, or you never need to fire. I think the best one is one you only need to fire once. I butchered that quote horribly, but you get the essence. It's pretty cool. It was a lot cooler when he said it. Okay.
Yeah. You just need to blow up one planet, and
yeah, basically
the rebellion understands.
So the Jericho fires, blows up this, like, mountain range behind him. Pretty good missile, I'd say. And he has this whole dialogue, and then basically we cut back to where we were at the beginning. He's getting a tour or whatever. blows up. He's now in the cave again. Then I think at this point he's like, the terrorists show him around and he sees all of his just interject if I'm skipping anything here. He's shown all of his weaponry just like all around this cave system, and how basically he's starting to pick up on the fact that these terrorists, everything he's supplied to the army has also been supplied to the terrorists somehow. And basically the gist is that they want him to build the Jericho missile. Somehow they figured out about it this fast. I don't know how, like, he just did the demonstration. I don't know how they already knew about it, but they figured it out. They want him to build the Jericho using some of his old tools, which is very... I don't know how... I'm not a science boy. I wouldn't call myself a man of science. But that doesn't necessarily make sense, right? Like, if you just hand me 3 missiles and say, make a nuke, it's not the same. I can't just do that. But he's Tony really Stark.
I mean, he is Tony Stark, and like he's very, very smart, but I also think that's a lot to ask of someone. Like, here we have this cave with some scraps and whatever equipment we can scrounge up, and I want you to make the best missile you've ever made ever.
Yeah.
Then again, he did build a miniaturized arc reactor and the Iron Man suit with those same materials. So I feel like he could have pulled
that's
it
true.
off.
Yeah, we're the dumb ones here. Okay.
Yeah, but I still think that, like, how are they gonna know that he's that good? Like, how are they, like, do they really think, oh yeah, we'll just hand him whatever we have lying around and he's gonna make an awesome missile? He's like, I just think that's very presumptuous.
The point of note here is that, this gets revealed later on, but they're not actually, that's not why they got him. This gets revealed later on with Obadiah Stane stuff, but they didn't kidnap Tony to have Tony Stark build them anything. That was just a matter of coincidence, basically. They were hired to just kill someone, and that person ended up being Tony Stark, and they smartly, were like, well, before we kill him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's get a little bit out of him.
I think you skipped over the part where they, at the very beginning, when they kind of they take the bag off of Tony's head, and they do, like, the standard recording.
Right.
Of, like, we have this prisoner. And we find out what that's about later on. But I do think that, like, they got him, and they were probably like, all right, we were supposed to kill this guy, but they probably realized, like, that's a waste. This guy makes awesome weapons, and even though we're supposed to kill him, I mean, why would we do that?
I think we hear a little bit of the message later on. I don't remember exactly what they said. I think it was just basically, I know he has a line talking to Obadiah Stane in person where he says later, like, you gave us trinkets to kill a prince, which that doesn't actually make sense at all. Yeah, I mean, you could kill a prince with any. I mean, he could have just killed him.
Just
like, that seems to imply that, like, we couldn't have killed him. He was too powerful or something. Or no,
fair,
actually,
are
they saying
maybe they, like, he paid them with the weapons?
Yeah, I think that's what they were implying.
Okay, so I'm stupid. That's what we're getting at. All right, all right, totally makes sense. Never mind, I'm an idiot. Anyways, where did I leave off? Okay, so he's in. Oh, there's a great quote here. So he gets shown all the missiles, gets told to build a Jericho. He says, I'm not doing it. And then Jensen's like, you got to do it. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. And then he's like, they're just going to kill me after a week. And Jensen's like, well, this is an important week. And he's like, you right. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. So he starts building. But little do they know, he's not building a Jericho. He's building something else. He's building an arc reactor, which none of them seem to notice, except they all notice and just don't care.
Yeah, they even show a scene of the guy looking at the camera saying, hey, what's he doing?
Yeah, it touches his chest, like, specifically notes on this blue glowing thing, like, holding his chest together, just gives him a nod, and then moves on. Okay,
it's
so
funny,
Go ahead.
I was reading the original Iron Man origin story from, I want to say, 1959.
63.
And that took place, they do the movie in Afghanistan, but the comic book was done in Vietnam, and the scientist who helps him out is Yinsen instead of Jensen.
Yeah, I've briefly heard about this. Hold on, quick pause. The podcast is still recording, but did you read the wrong comic book?
Was that the wrong comic book?
Yeah, Zero.
Think so.
Wait, which one? Zero. Which one did you read?
Okay, the page says 1959, but Iron Man's introduction was actually in 1963.
And that's the one you read, correct?
Well, yeah.
And then did you also
he...
read that one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Just to make sure. The one you read last night, which I asked you to read, you read like the comic book adaptation of the movie, right? Okay, I think we fucked up here. But
We
it's
might
fine.
have fucked up.
It's fine. Whatever. We're gonna talk about that later. So just whatever. Moving on. Back to where we were. We had just he just built the arc reactor, but on the low, he's also building an Iron Man suit. You know, his first thought was, how am I gonna get out of here? Do I build a big gun? Do I just blow this whole place up? No, I gotta build a suit of armor and fight my way out. So he does this cool thing. Cool thing. Yeah, that's true. It did work. He does this cool thing where he like takes 3 or like 8 pieces of thin like graph paper or something. He draws parts of the schematics on each one, and if you press them all together, you see the Iron Man schematics. This is basically the only sort of prevention of them knowing what he's doing. Somehow he's gonna build an entire suit without them knowing, and his only defense is a wall that they can't see behind through the cameras, and then the fact that they can't look at his papers. Somehow it works. He builds this Iron Man suit. He has a before we get to that though, he has a bit of a dialogue with Jensen where he's like, you have any family? Jensen's like, yeah, I come from a city called oh shoot, what's this? Is it Guillermo? Starts with a G. Whatever.
Yeah.
He comes from this city, which we'll come back in later. He says his family, once he leaves here, he's going to go see his family. This plays in. Once the suit's built, he's like, the suit's being built, and then the people notice, hey, what are they doing behind that wall that we can't see them from? they all go down. Jensen and Tony somehow planted a bomb at the door that no one noticed. So the people go down to check on them. Bomb explodes. Those people are dead. Jensen's got to build the suit. They have like a minute before people show up. The progress bar is not going to be done in time. Suit's not going to be done. Tony's like, stick to the plan, Jensen. Jensen's like, I can't. He pulls up a gun, goes Rambo, runs out into the hallway, screaming, shooting randomly, runs into a cross section where he sees like 100 soldiers all lined up ready to kill him. Sad stuff. Back with Tony. The suit's about to be done. He pops out. Oh no, the suit finishes. He rips out from the wall, and he's on a mission. He's killing people all over, left and right. Everyone's dead. Really inefficient moment where so he finds Jensen. Jensen's dying on the ground. There's this really they have a bit of a back and forth, but who cares about that? You know, who cares about this Jensen character? There's a scene where a soldier walks up, and it's just one soldier with a gun. Tony turns around, shoots an entire missile at him. That's super overkill. You could have just punched him, he would have died. But no, just blow your entire missile on this one person. Anyways,
fuck that guy.
Back to Jensen. Jensen's dying. You find out Jensen never really intended to leave because his family was already dead. He knew the entire time, basically, that the only way he was going to get out of here was to sacrifice himself to save Tony, which is a little weird that he knew that.
Yeah, and I also think that that's kind of not true. Like, I totally think there was a way for him to live and get out of there. He just was very adamant about dying.
Yeah, I mean, like, I get it in the moment.
He didn't express to Tony. He wasn't like, oh, yeah, at some point, I'm going to go see my family. They're dead, by the way. No, he was just like, hey, we're friends now. You're going to trust me. Also, I'm going to die at the end of this.
In the moment,
like,
I totally get the sacrifice. Like, when the suit's not ready yet and he needs to run out to buy time, I totally get that. But how did you know that was going to happen before that?
Yeah, when you were just talking,
that's what I'm saying.
2 days ago.
What if he didn't get shot? Like, was he just gonna commit suicide? Like, he was very adamant about meeting his family again.
Imagine their plan went perfectly. Neither of them got hurt at all, and then at the end of it, Yinsa was just like, "All right, and then shoots himself.
That's tragic. That'd be a very sad day for Tony. Anyways, Jensen dies. Jensen was shot by these 100 soldiers. He's dying. He's bleeding out. Somehow he didn't die already. He lived long enough to talk to Tony for a little bit. But he dies. And then Tony goes on a rampage, basically, lights up the flamethrowers, destroys the entire cave, blows everyone up. There's a I don't know, remind me, did he literally blow the place up? Like, did he set fire to some missiles and blow the thing up, or did he just...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole, like, weapon stock they had outside of the cave, he threw flamethrowers at it, burnt the whole thing up, and then flew away, and yeah, it exploded.
Okay. Shit's lit. He flies off. It's totally working. He's in the air. He's literally flying in this 3-ton suit. It's totally going to work until it stops working, and then he crashes, and somehow he lives. He doesn't die. Now, here's what you think's gonna happen. He crashes in the middle of a desert. He has nothing but this huge metal suit, no longer functions. You think maybe a little bit of this movie is probably going to be about him surviving in the desert. No, he gets picked up right away. Like 50 seconds pass, a plane shows up. They say, "Tony, we were looking for you." It's his good buddy, not Don Cheadle. Not Don Cheadle comes out. He says, "Next time, you're coming with me." Tony's on the ground dying, like, it's not time for jokes. Water. So they pick him up. They fly him back home. He sees Pepper Potts. They have a reunion. I just realized, is Happy not in this movie?
All right, so
No, Happy drove him to the first plane.
Okay, he is in this movie. Okay, forgot about him. What were you saying, Kaiser? Happy, his security guard?
Oh, yeah, no, he's in the movie at the beginning. Well, on the one hand, it's like, all right, this is a bit ridiculous. Like, he's been out here for, an hour, and already this frickin' helicopter shows up? But on the other hand, it's like, all right, he is the leader of, like, a huge company. I totally believe that there are people out there looking for him. Like, this isn't someone you just lose and then forget about. You know, he's very important to America.
Yeah. I think that's true, but it has been a week. I do think it was a bit
ridiculous, but at the same time, I do think there's an air of plausibility to it.
Here's what I'll say. I wouldn't call this, like, a major plot hole, but it is a little, it raises an eyebrow at the very least.
That's true.
Okay, so he's back home. He has a reunion with Pepper Potts. They have a little sweet moment. Then from here, I think we just jump straight to him going back home and building a suit. Is that right? I mean, this lasts a long time, but that is what he does. He just goes back home and starts
working.
There's
like some conference meetings and whatnot, but...
Oh, right. Okay, so immediately after he gets home, he says, "I want 2 things. I want cheeseburger. I want pussy. I want cheeseburgers, and I want a press assembly." So he assembles the press. He says, "Can we all just sit on the ground? We'll just have a casual conversation."
Yeah, while he's eating Burger King.
Anyone else want a Whopper?
I got an extra one. So he's sitting on the ground. He says some stuff, and then the most important thing he says is that they're shutting down the weapons branch of Stark Industries, which is a big deal because Stark Industries is only a weapon branch. So it's a pretty big deal. Obadiah Stane pushes him off the stage, says he doesn't know what he's talking about. Cut to, now I think we're building the suit. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or actually, maybe. Is he building the suit, or is the next scene Pepper having to reach into his chest and pull out his heart?
The next scene is him and Obadiah by the arc reactor.
You're right.
And Obadiah's like, "We sell weapons. We're ironmongers. That's what we do."
Yeah, I've seen this movie 4 times. I still can't.
I'm more of an Iron Man.
Okay, so basically, Tony says to Obadiah, he's like, "The arc reactor. Let's look into that a little bit." Obadiah's like, "The arc reactor? That was a stunt for hippies," and then okay. I mean, this is he's using this one thing to fuel his entire laboratory. It's like clean energy or some shit. That's not hippie stuff. Like, that is very valuable technology.
That's some
to the
hippie
world.
shit right there.
Well, I think the funny thing is he's like, "Oh, hey, we can't do anything with it. It's just to shut the hippies up." And then he's like, "By the way, I know you have a mini one in your chest."
Yeah, but we can't
use it, but I know you can.
Okay. So basically explains the arc reactor. Obadiah is not biting. Now we go And one of two things happen. He's either building the suit at this point, or Pepper Potts is sticking her hand in his chest. One or the other. I don't know. I don't care. At some point, that Pepper Potts scene happens. It's sweet. He gets a new arc reactor. Has to, and it's important because she gets his old one and puts it in the box. That's all basically. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I think it's good because this scene, up to this point, you really see that, like, I mean, when Pepper first shows up, you're like, oh, what's this, like, his secretary or whatever? And then you slowly realize, like, no, she, like, kind of takes care of his whole life for him. And so they have a pretty good relationship. Like, he's a womanizer and all, but, like, these two just get along. She works for him. And he seems like kind of an ass. And, like, nobody would really like him. But here she is, and she actually does genuinely like him, you know?
There's a scene later on in the movie where she has a line, she says, "You're all I have too, you know." And I think that accurately sums up their relationship. Is like, yeah, he's a bit of an asshole, and technically she's his, like, personal assistant, but, like, they're all that each other have, and that's important to them. Anyways, she gets his old arc reactor, the one he built in the cave, puts it in the box while he has a new one. Now, I think we start building that suit. Am I correct?
I don't see what else would happen here.
Okay, he's building the suit, finally. Took us 30 minutes to get here. It's going to take us 40 minutes to do this. He builds the suit. It takes a while. There's a couple of things like, you know, it does, there is some level of interest in, like, him doing it. It is somewhat fascinating. It's something we don't get a lot in the newer movies, but
yeah.
You know,
I honestly regret not seeing that more in later movies.
Yeah, I do think so. I do think it just ran a little long in this one. Like, I do like the idea. All right,
so I think one of the cool things about Iron Man is that he's self-made. Like, Tony Stark built this suit, and
in a cave with a box of scraps.
He's super smart. He's super smart, and that's his power. But, like, he builds this, like, Thor has all this power. He didn't make his hammer. He just walks in and is super powerful. Sure. In Avengers, you know, everything
has to work out, you know.
Everything cool about Cap came out of a bottle. But, like, Tony Stark made his own suit, and, like, so it's really cool to see him make the suit and, like, perfect it.
Right.
And so I do think the
totally
first time
because
you see it, it's like, wow, this is interesting. And then after that, it's kind of like, all right, I've seen this.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it is. Is the first time I rewatched this movie, I was like, wow, this is really something we don't see anymore. I thought it was really cool. And then the second time I'm rewatching, it was like, that novelty started to wear off, and I was like, oh, this is just taking a really long time. And that doesn't mean I don't ever want it again, because, okay, quick spoilers for Infinity War, is we do see, he does have a new version of his suit, and we don't, like, it is really cool, but we never see him. Yeah, we never see him work on it. Like, that came out of literally nowhere. It's really cool, but, you know, so I do wish we had a little bit of it more, but, like, in this one specific instance, it was a little too long. And there are certain scenes in this. I'd consider him building the suit to be most of Act 2. And there are certain scenes in Act 2 that are interesting with him doing that, like the scene, and they are relatively important, like the scene where he first takes flight. It's a good scene. He flies up to the sky. He's pushing the limits. His suit frosts over. He almost falls and dies, but quickly saves himself. That's a cool scene. It's also important for later on in the movie, but overall, a little too long. The other thing that happens during this act is that there's a big banquet being held by the Stark Foundation. He didn't get an invite. He crashes the party anyways. He shows up. He sees Obadiah. Obadiah lies to him. He's like, you know, stay low. I got the council right where I want him. Tony's like, yeah, fuck you, Obadiah. He goes in, and I forgot to mention this earlier. We have been introduced to Agent Coulson. We saw Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D. in the first press conference. We see him again here, and he's like, all right, bitch. Give me my fucking appointment. I swear to God, he really needs this appointment.
Well, they're not called S.H.I.E.L.D. yet. They're the Strategic Homeland Intelligence Enforcement Logistics Division.
Which, you know, you think no one looked at that? That hold on. That does spell S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Like, they didn't change it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so no one saw that. It was like, whoa. Why don't we just call ourselves S.H.I.E.L.D.? Like, it took them a while to figure that one out. Because this
twice in the
organization has
movie, they're
existed for a
like-
while.
Twice in the movie, they're like, "You need to come up with a new name." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got it." And then
Well,
at
here's
the end
the
of
thing-
the movie, it's just Shields.
Here's the thing about Shield. It is really out of place in this movie because it's a weird situation because on one hand, as a standalone movie, which this is because it's the first one in the MCU, as a standalone, Shield makes no sense in this movie. They barely impact it at all. They're only useful in the end. They're really only there to like build out to future movies possibly. Because like they don't really have any like setup. They don't really have a huge amount of payoff. So why are they there now? But conversely, it doesn't even do that well. Like looking back on it, like with the context of the entire MCU out, I still think Shield is kind of weird in this movie. Like I think Coulson acts kind of weird. I don't really know what Shield is doing. So Shield just if I could change one, well. If I could change one thing about this movie, it'd be the third act. But if I could change one small thing about this movie, then I would just take Shield out entirely, and then keep the end credit scene. So like we still have the end credits with Nick Fury building to Avengers, but just take Coulson out and fuck him. Anyways,
yeah, I think the movie does fine without Coulson. It is really awkward, and like looking back, the first time I rewatched it, it was like, oh, that's cool, and then like the second and third time, I was like, he's not adding anything to the movie. Like, he's just an extra guy who happens to be here.
Yeah. Anyways, we're at this party. We get some light flirting with Tony and Pepper. They go up, they do some dancing. Then they go up to like a rooftop or something, and they have a brief conversation. And he leaves to go get her a drink. This is important. He goes downstairs. He goes back to the party. He wants to talk to. He gets it. He's getting her a drink, but gets stopped by the reporter. The reporter, same one from the beginning of the movie. She's like, "You want to explain this?" And then hands him some pictures. It's the city. It's the city that Jensen's from. I forget the name.
Gomera.
But in Gomera, in the city, it's being occupied by the terrorists that Tony was taken from. Who, by the way, are the 10 Rings. Not really that important. You think it would be more important considering, you know, the Mandarin
Big
and all
Iron Man
that.
villain.
But really not. They are the 10 Rings, but who cares? They're occupying this village, and they have a bunch of Tony Stark military grade weaponry in there. And he's like, I have no idea about this. Let me go figure it out. Ditches the reporter, ditches Pepper Potts, goes to Obadiah. Obadiah says, remember, when he entered the scene, when Tony entered the party, Obadiah said, "Hey, stay low. I got the council right where I want him." Because at this point, they're trying to Obadiah has set up that they're trying to force Tony out, I think. Tony leaves the scene, talk to Obadiah. So it's been like 10 minutes. Obadiah says, "You idiot. I was the one who's kicking you out." And then like is, you know, shaking his hand so Tony can't actually like do anything in front of the public. Excuse me. I'm choking. I'm okay.
Been there.
So what's weird about this? And what's important? Jesus.
The suspense is killing me.
Okay. What's important for this is that this is like the downfall of Obadiah. It is where he starts taking a turn into being just crazy. Because, like, why would you tell Tony that? You have no reason to blow your load there and be like, "Tony, I'm going to kill you," or whatever.
Yeah, he had such good cover.
Yeah, I mean, he literally could have just said, "Oh, wow, I have no idea about that. I'll look into it." But no, he's like, "You idiot."
That's what like Yagami would have done.
Anyways.
Yeah, I don't... this is really the first thing that I see, and I'm like, Obadiah, like, what are you doing? Because before this, everything seems to line up really well. Like, oh, he's just like this businessman, he just wants to sell weapons and make money, that's his thing. And now it's like, alright, you're really trying to, like, mess with Tony here? Like, that doesn't... And it's
starting to get hammed up a little bit. It's getting a little crazy, cheesy villain in this area. But I will say, this is the start of the downfall. There is a scene later on where I think he's still pretty good, but this is step one, and by the end, he's gone off the cliff.
Yeah, well, I think my favorite part of the whole thing was that Tony only showed up because he wasn't invited. So if Obadiah had just sent him an invite, he just wouldn't have shown up.
100%. 100% he wouldn't have showed up.
Probably,
He's
yeah.
too busy. All right. So Obadiah has this whole thing. I think does Tony just leave? Yeah, he definitely leaves. Where does he go at this point? I forget.
He just goes to the
Oh, right.
city.
He goes to his lab. He goes to his lab, puts on the arm, and starts blowing shit up. He's pissed. Like he's fucking mad. He puts the suit on. He says, "I'm out of here." 5 seconds later, he's in the Middle East. He's flown all the way there. He lands in this city. No time has passed whatsoever. He's blowing shit up left and right. He's saving people. He's killing people. Who cares?
So I really liked that scene because it's like the first time he uses the suit for combat. It's all painted, and
Yeah, that
good
scene looks
CGI.
great. Like when I talk about the fact that the Iron Man suit holds up, I am specifically looking at that scene where it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about that scene, but it looks different than what we get. Like if I was more into like cinematography and stuff, then I'd be able to tell you what it is about it, but I don't know. All I know is that it looks different but really cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, he's in whatever the city was, I forget already. Gomera. So he's saving people. He's saving some people, killing others. He's, destroying his weapons or whatever. I forget. He's about to leave. After doing all that, he saves the town. He's about to leave, gets shot by a tank, turns around, blows the tank up, flies away again. And then he shows up on a radar for the U.S. military. Because they were also watching that city because, terrorists and stuff. So they were like, did we do that? No. Who did that? We have a unidentified flying object or whatever in the area. So we have Not Don Cheadle calls up Tony. He's like, dude, you got any drones in the area? Tony's like, I don't have any drones in the area. 2 fighter jets fly up. They're ready to kill this thing. So he's like, so we get a little bit of a back and forth. Tony calls Not Don Cheadle back up again. He's like, it's me, please stop. But it's too late. What's he gonna do? Yeah. So it's too late. What is he gonna? He can't call it off. The fighter jets are basically gonna kill this guy. Tony's like on the bottom of one of them. They're doing barrel rolls all over the place. They can't shake him off. Tony flies off one of the ends of one of the planes, destroys the other plane's wing. That guy's fallen to his death. Tony hasn't done anything aggressive. They haven't landed a hit on him. Everyone's dying anyways. The guy's parachute won't pop. He's literally about to die. Tony Stark flies down, saves him, and then everyone cheers. And then he just gets away. It's fine.
Yeah, it seems legit.
So he flies back. He's like, well, as he's flying back, he's like, hey, so you want to come see my stuff? The guy's like, no, that's crazy. Okay, so we go back. I think at this point, I think there's a scene in between it, but I don't remember it. So we're just going to go. He lands back in his laboratory. No time's passed whatsoever. It takes a 5-minute trip. California to the Middle East. Who cares? He lands down. He can't get the suit off. It's like being all wacky and stuff. Pepper Potts walks down, sees him in the suit, and he's like, this isn't the worst thing you've caught me doing. She's like, you're right. So basically they have this whole dialogue where, she's like, dude, you can't be doing that. And he's like, why not? And she's like, you just can't. And he's like, then he drops a real bomb on her. And he's like, I'm responsible for mass murder and you were fine with it. Now I'm trying to save people and you're trying to leave. You're the evil one. And then she's like, fuck you, Tony, and walks out. Comes back, says,
it's a good rebuttal.
Says, at some point in this conversation, Tony wants her to do something, I think, right? He says, like, go to Obadiah's computer.
Yeah.
At some point that happens in this conversation. Pepper Potts is like, all right, I'll do it. So she goes downstairs. I mean, she goes back. She says, I'll do it. Then she leaves, goes to Obadiah's place, plugs in the old USB, opens up all the files, sees some files from the terrorist attack, or not the terrorist attack. She sees a video with what the 10 rings holding Tony Stark hostage. She hits up the old Control T translate button automatically translates it. Great technology. Tony Stark's laptop is really cool. So
Yeah.
it starts translating it.
top tier.
It's the guy's voice too. It's not even like a Google voice thing. It's the guy's actual voice. He's saying like
translated in real time.
Yeah. So the guy's saying, hey, this is Tony Stark, I want more money. Obadiah walks in. He's like, hey, Pepper, how's it going? Pepper's like, I'm not doing nothing. He's like, well, I didn't think you were doing nothing. Goes to pour himself a drink. She's like, I'm totally not stealing files. He's like, I'm sure you're not. And then she just...
You're a respected member of this company. I don't know why you would do that.
Yeah, totally does not suspect a thing for some reason. Or if he does, he's just really stupid about it and doesn't even check until...
Yeah, well, he literally walks around her, sees the computer screen, and she just has the screensaver up. Like, she's not even doing anything.
Yeah, isn't
on the computer, and that raised no flag.
He's not even like, hey, what are you doing? Like, she doesn't even have to lie because he doesn't ask. So finally, she sneaks the USB out. He's like, hey, is that today's paper? She's like, yeah. He's like, can I have it? She gives it to him. And then somehow, at that point, he's like, wait a second. And then he goes to check. He's like, fuck, she got away somehow. So she's walking out.
This isn't today's paper.
She walks out. Coulson's there. There's this really weird interaction where Coulson's like, did you forget about our meeting? She's like, I didn't forget about the meeting. Meeting's right now. I'll give you the best meeting of your life. Like, what does that mean? That's a really weird statement.
I have no idea.
Okay, so they're both rushing out. Somehow, they have an off-screen conversation where she reveals that Obadiah is crazy. He's gonna help her. Flashback to Tony is in his apartment. He thinks he's like just chilling or something. He thinks Pepper shows up.
He gets
does he call
from Pepper.
Sorry,
No. Okay, so I believe you back up a bit to the scene where Obadiah goes to meet the Ten Rings guys.
Oh, right.
Okay,
Skip that scene. And I like that scene. That's one of my favorite Obadiah scenes, which is why I said he's not off the cliff yet. I still enjoy this scene. It's after this point where he starts getting really crazy. But he has this scene. Obadiah goes to meet with the guys from the Ten Rings. He walks in. They got spec ops. He's got his spec ops. They're like, leave all the soldiers outside of the tent. We're going to have a meeting. They walk in. The Ten Rings dude is like, this is what Tony Stark was building in our cave. I'll give you the plans for free, and all I want is like 10, maybe 20 soldiers. Just give me 10, 20 of these suits in return, and we're square. And Obadiah walks up to him, flips his own USB drive. Everyone's got USBs here. And then this guy starts freaking out. He's paralyzed. He can't move. You see veins popping out of his head. And the guy's like, technology. It was always you terrorists' Achilles heel. Okay.
A little racist, but
yeah, it seemed like a charged statement, but whatever. So he's like, fuck you. And then he walks out of he says, I'm not going to kill. He says something like, I'm not going to kill you or some shit. He walks out.
Oh, yeah, he says the paralyzation is the least of your problems.
Yeah, he walks out. What is that noise? Is that a car? Whatever. He goes outside. You see that his soldiers completely destroyed their soldiers. Everyone's dead except his soldiers. Then that's a really cool scene, I think. Then presumably they go in and kill that guy. Now we go back to Tony's chilling at his house. I can't remember. He either called Pepper or called not Don Cheadle. I can't remember which one.
It was Pepper.
No, Pepper calls him.
Pepper calls him.
She goes to get the thing, the files off of the computer.
Yeah, she calls to tell him
out,
what
and then
she
calls
found.
Tony.
Right, okay.
Right.
So, he's on the phone with Pepper, but before he could say anything, USB flicked in his ear, paralyzed. And then, you got 15 minutes of paralyzation. 14 of those minutes were used by Obadiah explaining his evil plan. He's just like, well, now that I have you here, here's what I did, Tony. Blah, 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 blah. Finally, after giving the entire plot of the movie, he's like, okay, bye-bye, and he walks out. Then, with only 1 minute left, Tony Stark's he takes the arc reactor. I guess that's pretty important.
Yeah, that's kind of important.
The thing keeping Tony alive.
Yeah, he did go there for a reason. He didn't
just paralyze him for no reason.
So, Obadiah goes in. takes the arc reactor, walks out. Tony's dying. Luckily, there was only a minute left on that thing. So he's like, he's back up. He's crawling downstairs because if you remember, Pepper Potts put his old arc reactor in a box for him as like a gift. So he's thinking, I just got to get there, put that thing back in, we're good to go. He crawls all the way there through his penthouse. This thing's huge. He's like going downstairs, crawling on the floor, gets all the way downstairs to his thing, grabs the box, smashes it on the ground, dies right there. Not dead, but like he got so close and then passes out. Not Don Cheadle shows up. For some reason, I don't know exactly why. I think Pepper might have called him or something. He comes there, sees Tony on the ground with the arc reactor, puts the arc reactor in his chest. Tony's back alive. He says, Tony's like, "Where's Obadiah? Where's Pepper?" And then not Don Cheadle's like, "She's going with the SHIELD dude with like 5 agents to arrest him." He's like, "She's gonna need more." Puts on the suit, flies away. Rhodey says, "I want a suit," or something like that. What does he say? What's the line?
Oh, not this
he
time.
looks at
Yeah, he looks at the suit, the
he
prototype,
looks.
and he's like, "Oh, that's nice."
Yeah, something like that. It's either not this time or man, I want a suit. One of those two things. I don't remember. So he says, "Not this time." Goes in his cool car, drives off. Tony's flying over. This is where we get into crazy land. Pepper Potts is in Obadiah's lab, or Tony's lab, but now it's being occupied by Obadiah. They see the first Iron Man suit, the one that Tony built in a cave with the box of scraps. And then they're like, so he was building a suit. Good thing we got here just in time to stop him. And then a bigger suit shows up. It's like, rah! It starts killing people.
For some reason, he put dinosaur sounds in his suit. It was a really weird choice.
Well, I don't know if you're joking, but if you notice, like, his voice is really just like when Tony talks in the suit, it's a little distorted. But when Obadiah talks in the suit, it's like, "Tony, it's me, Obadiah." It's like
It's just one of those surround sound speakers, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
Thought it would be a good touch.
Anyways, Obadiah is killing everyone left and right. Everyone's dead but Coulson, literally. And Pepper. I guess Pepper gets out too. They're both running out. Tony Stark flies in the Iron Man suit. They're fighting now. Blah, blah, blah. It's a really long fight. They get in the street. Some people are saved. You know, Obadiah is just killing everyone left and right, which is not in his MO. I mean, yeah, he's crazy and he's killing people, but like, if we remember, Obadiah's plan here is just to take out Tony Stark and run the company. Why is he killing these civilians? Like, why is he flipping
He's
cars
literally, like,
and
tossing
taking everyone out?
motorcycles around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Obadiah is literally crazy at this point. He is off the wall. They're fighting
He's gone
now.
mad with power, man.
Yeah, the Mad Titan, Obadiah Stane. Tony, his
Kind of
suit's
looks like
like
Thanos.
kind of. So Tony, his suit's
Little bit.
powering down. I think it's at like 20% at this point. Obadiah's got 1,000,000,000%. Tony flies up to the sky. He's like, "This is the only way I could do it." He flies up to the sky. Obadiah's like, "Well, I'm coming too," and he flies up to the sky. They're both in the air, and Obadiah's like, "My suit's better than yours," and Tony's like, "Well, how did you solve the icing problem?" And then you look at Obadiah, and he's iced over. Tony's perfectly fine. We don't know how Tony solved it either. So, good question.
But he did.
Yeah. So Tony's fine. Obadiah's fallen to his death. Tony's
in
like,
the middle of the city. Like,
Yeah.
just lets him fall. Oh, whatever
That's-
collateral damage, I'll just pay for it. Like, I don't...
Iron Man, the first Iron Man suit was like 2 tons at least. Obadiah's suit, that's 20 tons. That thing's gonna land, and that's an asteroid. That is equivalent to an asteroid landing. So,
Yeah.
but whatever, who cares? He's just gonna fall and kill everyone. Not a big deal. Tony's like,
big
"I
deal."
did it. I saved the day. 1% remaining." And then he starts falling. He's gonna die too. He doesn't. I don't remember exactly how. They just land. It's fine. Everything's fine. So, but he thinks Obadiah's gone. So he's like, he takes off his mask, I think, to talk to Pepper for a second. Obadiah lands right behind him. Boom, boom. They're fighting. Stuff happens. They're on the roof of the building now, still fighting. And then Tony's like, "Hey, Pepper, hit the button." And she's like, "I don't want to hit the button." And then Obadiah's like, and is like shooting. And like Tony falls from the ceiling and he's holding on. He's like, "Hit the button." And she's like, she's like, "The button will kill you." She says this, "If I do it, you'll die." She hits the button. He doesn't die. So this is more
Alright, well,
And that's
he's
why
not
you're
a
not the
scientist,
physicist,
okay?
bitch.
It's miraculous. How do you do it? I don't know. But oh yeah, but right before that happens, he's hanging from the ceiling. Obadiah is like, Obadiah's like, I'm gonna kill you, and he's shooting missiles, he's shooting bullets, everything's flying off, everything's missing this stationary target.
He's like 5 feet in front of him.
He shoots a missile, it misses, and he's like, dang, you ripped out my targeting system. You know that was a last minute addition to the script. You know they're like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Quick, say something. So yeah, he's missing left and right. Tony literally isn't moving. Presses the button. The thing literally explodes, but just pushes Tony out of the way to safety, and then blows up Obadiah. Obadiah, like, pretty much dead, falls into the arc reactor. He just dies or something. I don't know. Then we go. They have a little bit of a pepper pot scene or whatever. I don't remember. It seems everything's fine now, right? Did I miss anything? Yeah. So they go to another press conference, because now it's like, you know, headlining news is like, what the hell happened at the Stark facilities?
Robots fighting on the street.
Yeah. So they're at. So he's in another room. In the other room, there's like a bunch of press assembling. Coulson walks up to him, says, "Here's your alibi. Just read the cards. You're good." He's like, "Cool." Excuse me, I just burped again. Before he does that, he's like, "Pepper." I don't know. They say something romantic. I forget the details. She says, he's like, "Remember that night?" She's like, "Oh, that night where, you know, we were on the roof and you were going to kiss me and then you left me there alone." And that's why, yes, it was important that he left her there, because that's really a sad thing that happened to her, and I feel very bad for Pepper. It's not very nice of him to have done that. So, like, my bad.
Stand someone up like that.
Yeah, he's like, my bad.
Yeah.
And that is important, because they're not dating by the end of this movie, basically, is what we're gathering. So, he's going to the press. He's like, he's reading the cards. He's like, you know, saying whatever the alibi was. Reporter, from the beginning, stands up. She's like, "You expect us to believe that was a bodyguard?" And he's like, "Well, listen, it's one thing to say it's not a bodyguard. It's another thing to say that I'm a hero. I mean, come on. That's crazy." She's like, "I didn't say you were a hero." He's like, "Oh."
"Well, you should have."
And then, the cut to credits. He says, "Oh, my bad." And he's like, he starts rambling a bit, and not Don Cheadle says, like, "Dude, stick to the cards." He's like, "You got it. You're right, boss." He looks at the cards, throws them out the window, puts on glasses, flips them all off, says, "I'm Iron Man," and then storms out of the building. Nice. And that's the end. Yeah. End of movie. Post-credit scene. He's going home. Jarvis is talking to him, but it's kind of like flickering in and out. He's like, "What's up? What's going on here?" Sees this dude in his hallway, pulls out his gun, ready to shoot him. Nick Fury turns around and says, like, "I'm here for the Avengers." Cut to credits again. And that's it.
Tony's like, "Who?"
Yeah. Shoots him on the spot. Nick Fury's dead. End of movie. All right, that's basic. So if you didn't see the movie, that's basically what happens.
More or less, yeah.
All right. Anything of note? Did you guys like the movie? Oh, actually, okay. Let's get into comic books. You guys, well, okay. Zero was supposed to read the 1963 Iron Man origin. Kaiser was supposed to read the 2010, 2000 or maybe 2014 or something. It was like a comic book adaptation of this movie. We were going to compare and contrast the differences, but you guys both ended up reading the 1963 stuff. So let's just talk about that, I guess. So you both watched it. You both read it. I did not. What happens? Anything similar at all?
Yes, actually.
There are a fair number of similarities. Like, without the Obadiah subplot, pretty much the same whole thing happens with Tony at the beginning. Except one thing I thought was kind of interesting was, rather than testing some, I guess, generic missile, he actually has like a unique piece of technology that he's like coming up with military applications for when he's pitching it to the whatever military branch is trying to buy it.
Sure.
It's like these He calls them his tiny transistors, and they're supposed to strengthen.
I have a transistor.
Good for you, man.
Anyways, what's he trying to do?
They basically strengthen. In his demonstration, it was magnets, but I think it's supposed to work on any machine. It's
Well, he
magic
uses it
science,
on the door, right?
Wait, hold on. What is it doing though?
It's strengthening the magnet. He has like a little magnet next to his tiny transistor, and there's this big metal door standing in the corner of the room. He's like, that door's locked. I'm gonna open it with this. And they're like, no, you're not.
And that piece of technology was so valuable that he was kidnapped by terrorists for it.
Well, yeah.
We need to open doors.
Actually, no. In this, well, first off, in this, like Kaiser said, it's not in Afghanistan. It's in Vietnam, because this is set in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And
okay.
They basically, when they attack Tony's deal or whatever, they notice, oh, this guy's big deal. We should bring him back, see if we can get anything for him. I guess they're just gonna ransom him, but then their boss is like, yeah, he's gonna build weapons for us.
And I assume this is not the Ten Rings.
No.
Okay.
This is some, like, communist terrorist group that exists in South Vietnam.
So just
is how
generic. No one specific.
Yeah, they had this leader who wouldn't shut up about his name. But overall, yeah, it wasn't like anything that applies to the Marvel universe later on.
Yeah,
Although
the villain's completely different.
I kind of laughed when you get into the comic, like the first two panels, they're like, oh, and here's the secret military base where Anthony Stark is working on blah, blah, blah. And there's these soldiers standing out front talking about how rated Tony Stark is. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, that must just be an old term. Because I just...
Rated?
Rated. Yeah,
Okay.
like, I guess it just means he's, like, famous or important.
Like overrated or underrated.
Oh, this is adequately rated. Look how adequately rated.
Right, he's
Tony
just
Stark
rated.
is. Okay,
I
so...
guess that's not bad after seeing that magnet display.
Alright, so two questions.
Yeah.
One, this is 1963. Well, both relate to the age at which it comes out. One, primarily Asian people in this comic. Is it racist? Does it come across as racist at any point?
Yes.
Really?
A little bit. I mean...
Yeah, not... Well, it's weird, because, of course, it's American, and they're trying to do Vietnamese people in Vietnam who have no reason to be speaking English, and have them speaking in English.
Oh, so okay, so it's like every text box, and I'm Asian, so I can say this, is just ching chong, and then there's a note, like with an asterisk that says translation.
No, they have them in English, but it's like a bad...
Yeah, it's like English.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Kind of. For some of the characters. There is one
Oh,
Asian
jeez.
character who Jensen was based off of, called Yinsen. And he... he's supposed to be like a renowned physicist, and he speaks like a normal human being. So that's like the kind of not racist character, but the rest of
Okay.
them,
Cool.
pretty racist.
So, yeah, the smart guy speaks normal, but all these dumb Asian people...
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the most part, the other Asian people are... Like, the one Asian person, aside from Yinsen, who does a lot of the talking, is the leader of the terrorist group. So, like, of course, on top of him being Asian, like, they're trying to kind of make him look bad because he's a communist terrorist,
Okay, sure. All right, so my other question is this comic, like, is it even good? Like, does it hold up in any aspect at all?
I'd say the dialogue is okay.
Yeah, all
which
those
is what people
racist
read
parts.
comic books for.
All right. Any other notable differences? I mean, okay. Well, maybe there's probably a ton of differences. Any notable similarities that you haven't mentioned yet? Well, you guys only read, I don't know how many Kaiser read, but Zero, you only read 2 issues. How many did you read, Kaiser?
I only read the one.
Okay. So you probably didn't, like, there was no conclusion to be had, right?
Right. Like, the first comic just ends with him escaping from their terrorist base.
Okay.
Well, he kind of beats them.
Yeah. Yeah, he beats the leader of the group and then escapes.
Okay.
And the second comic is just a different encounter altogether.
All right.
So-
All right. Well, I was hoping it'd be a little. Maybe we. Iron Man. I know Iron Man 1 doesn't seem to be based off too heavily of anything of note, but I know, and I don't necessarily know if Iron Man 2 is either, but I know Iron Man 3 is definitely based off of a comic in some, not definitely, but like in some aspects, and then obviously like Age of Ultron and stuff. So we're gonna keep doing these comic book comparisons, and then for some of them it's gonna work a little better than the others. So like when we get to Age of Ultron, we'll have like a definitive comparison type thing. But
Yeah, Civil War ought to be good.
yeah, so that about covers it for the comic books on this one. I do have some notes on the box office and the budget stuff. Last time I recorded this, I talked about some of the X-Men stuff, but I did pull up some other statistics. I don't really have any conclusions to make off of this, but I thought it'd just be worth noting. This movie had $140. It was really cheap, actually. That's how they. Robert Downey Jr. was going through some stuff at this point, so he just agreed to do it for a burger. So they have
it has the
140
best CGI of its decade.
I said it again. $140 million budget, and then it grossed in total $585.2 million. For comparison, I went back to X-Men, which did $75 million budget, which is the only thing really notable about that is really cheap. Like if you compare this movie, this movie had bigger stars. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. was kind of tailing off, but he was still a big name. And then, not kind of tailing off, he had completely tailed off, but he was still a recognizable name. And then there's, Gwyneth Paltrow probably got paid a ton for it. So in that regard, I'm sure they were expensive, but X-Men is like an ensemble cast. Like you had a lot of characters in X-Men, so to only have a $75 million budget is kind of crazy. But that movie grossed $296.3 million. So percentage-wise, they're about the same, but overall, a lot smaller scale for X-Men. Last time I recorded this, I had said that like I had extrapolated that maybe that was just the nature of comic book movies at that point, and like we could see that based off of that, Iron Man really sort of kicked things off. But I went back and pulled up Spider-Man 1's box office and budget, and I'm basically wrong. And in fact, Spider-Man blows things out of the water. Spider-Man has a $139 million budget, $1 million less than Iron Man. But as to where Iron Man only did about $600 million in the box office, Spider-Man did $821.7 million. So Spider-Man, both origin stories. Spider-Man obviously a bigger character, but blew Iron Man, X-Men all out of the water. Blew most. I mean, even nowadays, that's like not even adjusted for inflation, which would really bump it up. Like that is, I think. Yeah. I want to say that like Black Panther did 600, or I don't remember exactly what Black Panther did, but like that is comparable to the money that superhero movies are still making nowadays, not adjusted for inflation. So Spider-Man's pretty impressive in that regard. I also pulled up Doctor Strange just as another sort of obscure origin story. About the same. It was about $160 to $236 million budget, not quite exact, and then grossed about $677.7 million in the box office. So less than Spider-Man, a little bit more than Iron Man, so pretty comparable. But I just thought that was interesting. Any other notes on the movie before we go into ranking, I guess? I mean, this is the first one, but we could discuss just sort of general thoughts on the quality of the movie.
So, the first thing that I want to know is just that, like we said, analyzing it, it's not a great movie. It kind of falls... It very much, I think, starts off pretty strong and then trails off. But I do think, as opposed to, like, Thor and the Dark World, this is a pretty good movie.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, definitely in that comparison, I agree. And I want to say that I'll still probably give this movie in the top half. Like we'll definitely see as we go on. But if I were to guess, this movie's probably going to stay in the top half of the Marvel movies. I just think it's going to be on the lower side of it, of the lower side of the top half. But if you would ask me, on the first time I rewatched it, this movie would have been competing for top 5. And I just think now that I've seen it so many times, now that I've, just sort of gotten bored with how long things tend to be, how like slow paced it is, I think it's gonna stay in the upper echelon, but just on the lower half of that upper echelon. Right. Anything of note for you, Zero?
I more or less feel the same. It does sort of like the flaws of the movie become more obvious the
Yeah.
more you watch it, and but I still do think it's like one of the better Marvel movies. I mean, it's a very solid introduction to Iron Man.
Yeah.
Who
Well, the thing
kickstarted
is,
the entire universe.
I agree. And the thing is, though, I'm looking at Doctor Strange, and you know, I'm definitely due for a rewatch on Doctor Strange, and we'll get to that movie later. But I'm just thinking about each movie. If you had asked me earlier, I would have said Iron Man better than Doctor Strange 100%. Now I'm not 100% sure. Like, now I'm gonna need to really think about that when we watch Doctor Strange. And I think, you know, I had talked about the novelty of the suit building process wearing off, and I think that's an adequate metaphor for the movie in general, which is why like the first time I rewatched it, it was so unique, and because it was so unique, I managed to find so much joy out of it. Like, the building the suit, the being kidnapped by terrorists, I thought, like, wow, this is really stuff that just it just doesn't seem to happen in the newer movies, at least not.
Yeah.
Even if it sounds like it happens similarly, the tone just felt so different. And then once you got past that, and maybe this is just me, but once you get past that, is like, yeah, this movie is really slow. You know, like it's
Yeah.
it's really hard to watch at certain points. And you know,
Yeah.
Well, that's
go ahead.
the movie that I feel like that about, and this isn't a really good comparison, but I kind of feel like that about the original Star Wars movie. Like, yeah, there's novelty here because this was the first one, and when it came out, like, blew people's minds. But you go back and you watch it, and it's like, this is pretty good.
Well, maybe one day we'll do a Star Wars in review. That would be interesting.
Possibly.
And there is a fair amount of movies out for that. So maybe after this whole thing's up in 20 years or however long it takes to get through this. Okay. Any other closing notes before we go ahead and just give this one the seal of approval as number one out of all of the MCU? This is easily the best of the ones we've reviewed so far.
Yeah, of all the ones we reviewed, top tier.
Any closing notes?
So, my least favorite character was the reporter lady. I don't remember her name, Christine something.
How could you even give her the title of least favorite character? Like, I don't even think
she
of her.
was barely a character.
Yeah, like,
Well,
you know,
right,
by
but that's
extension, my least favorite character is that guy who asked him that first question in that first assembly. Like, I hate that guy.
Well,
he did nothing.
'cause she's
relevance
in-
to the plot.
She's only in 3 scenes, but, like, over the course of those 3 scenes, she's, like, kind of attacking him for what he does, and then she screws him, and then she goes back to doing what she was doing, and it's like, why'd you fuck him? Like, I just
Where's
don't
your
understand.
character arc, Christine?
I will say, she is more important than me and Zero are giving her credit for. She's in 3 scenes, 2 of which are like really pivotal to the plot. Like the first one, she's just there to sort of like give us insight into Tony's character. But the second time she shows up, he's the reason he goes to that city. The third time she shows up, he's the reason he admits he's Iron Man. So like in a certain respect, she does sort of like play importance to the plot. So I see why you might have reason to like even think about her, but those are so like minor to me that, you know, I don't know who my least favorite. Probably Obadiah, but like it's just I just don't even think about her character that much. As to where with Obadiah, like he disappointed me. You know, like I have no reason to be sad about this reporter not being this great character, but I am sad that Obadiah was like I think in a different world, you know, if he just wasn't as insane, I think you would be thinking about Obadiah as like one of the best villains of the MCU. Like, not the best, obviously, like, but in the same way that people think about Loki, I think you could think about Obadiah if he didn't get so crazy in the third act. Like, before I rewatched this movie, I 100% did not remember he was in this movie at all. Like, I completely forgot who Obadiah was and, like, even what the villain was of this movie because it had been so long since I watched it. And then I rewatched it. I was like, oh, yeah, this guy. Totally forgot about him. So I think if he just stuck the landing a little better, or not even really stuck the landing, if he just did a flip and then stuck the landing, then I would have been more on board with him.
Yeah, I mean, he starts off pretty good. When I remember the first time I watched it, I had like 0 interest in him because I was like 10 and just wanted to see the hero fight the villain. But, you know, going back and looking at him, it's like, all right, on the one hand, there was a lot of potential here, because this was before the whole concept of the evil businessman was overused, because at this point it's super overdone now.
Yeah, and then he also embodies another trope that's particular to the MCU, is like he is the main hero. Like, they have the same powers and they just fight at the end, because like that's basically what happens in every single Iron Man movie, and then also happens in like
in Ant-Man.
Yeah. It's a very common problem for these MCU movies to just sort of copy paste who the main character is, and then just like go from black to white. Okay, that was a bad go from.
Well, so one of the things I want to take note on that is that that contrast could have been done better with Obadiah. I think they really missed out by, for starters, having him work with the terrorist group. I think that was a good scene, but I think that overall it didn't do good for him in the movie. I think that what they should have done is had him and Tony, they're working together, they're making these weapons, they don't really care who's getting hurt, because this is what they do. This is how they make their money. They like to wear fancy suits and smoke cigars and gamble. And, Tony's kind of the brains of making the weapons and stuff, and he kind of runs the company, and that, they're kind of a team. And then Tony gets kidnapped by terrorists, and now he's got this reactor arc, and Obadiah wants to use the reactor arc to make weapons, but Tony's had this change of heart, and so he steals it from him and makes a suit. And I think that kind of works better as a storyline, because you see how they kind of start off being the same, and then Tony has decided to change his life. Whereas this, it's like, you think they're the same at the start, and then it's like, oh no, Obadiah is just actually insane and was trying to kill him for almost no reason.
That sounds interesting. That is certainly an interesting proposal. I would need to think about it to say if I like it more or not, but certainly an interesting one.
My other argument, and we'll be able to talk about this more after we finish the Iron Man series, is that they should have switched Iron Man 3 and Iron Man 1, and I think that really would have set Obadiah as one of the better villains in Marvel. I think they could have, because it was already the 10 rings to start. So I just have those guys be led by the Mandarin, start there, and meanwhile, the subplot throughout the 3 movies is that Obadiah is trying to get this reactor arc from Tony. He's trying to keep this business going. He's trying to still sell weapons. And at the very end, he comes out and you realize that he's set this whole underlying plot where he's, framed Tony and he's going to steal his suit and blah, blah, blah. And I think that really would have done good.
When I was looking into the production end of this movie, there was an interesting thing. Well, actually, this is actually more related to Iron Man 2, but it was originally Jon Favreau who directed this, also plays Happy. It was originally, and he directed 2 as well, but not 3. He originally planned for Mandarin to be the big enemy of Iron Man 2, but one of his co-writers, I think, was basically like, they're just not ready for that yet. It's just a little too fantastic. Like, it's a little too mystical for the MCU at the current moment, which may or may not have been true. So that is probably in the realm of thinking of why they didn't or wouldn't have done that. It is an interesting idea, and one I think we'll probably get more into, as we pass Iron Man 3, because there are some notable... It would require a fair amount of restructuring, but I get what you're going for. And I think we'll, definitely note on that, and we'll get back to that idea after Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
All right, any last notes? Zero?
Well, as we were watching the movie, I was kind of wondering about, the precedents that this movie set for the rest of the MCU. And I started to think that maybe having a shitty villain was one of those precedents. Because I do feel like Obadiah is a pretty underdeveloped character. They didn't really pay that much attention to what his actual motivations were, and at times it sort of feels like, well, why is he doing this?
Well,
that's the whole third act.
Let me actually look up Spider-Man. When did Spider-Man 3 come out?
I think that
came
was
out in 2007. So it was before Iron Man. So you could look at Iron Man as maybe having started that trend, but I would look at maybe just everything as having because if we when I look at all of the movies, actually let me look at X-Men Last Stand. When did Last Stand come out? 2006. So the entire X-Men trilogy had come out at this point, the entire Spider-Man trilogy, and then we have some like Blade stuff, but I'm not going to talk about Blade because that's a different conversation. But with all 6 of these movies, all 3 Spider-Man, all 3 X-Men, there is only one good villain, and before the asterisk is on Magneto. But if you look at Magneto was a villain in X1 and X3, and we can talk about this if we ever get to these X-Men movies, and we'll talk about the Spider-Man movies later. But X1 had Magneto as the villain. X1's not a good movie, and sure, Magneto's a good villain in it, but he's not as good as you'd expect him to be. X2, Magneto's really good in that movie, but he's not the villain. X3, Magneto is the villain again, and that movie's terrible. You look at Spider-Man 1, movie's alright, the villain's alright. Spider-Man 2, villain's great. Doc Ock is like really, really good, and that movie's really, really good. And then you look at Spider-Man 3, terrible. Like that movie's garbage, and that has to do a lot with the villains of, you know, James Franco's Green Goblin, and then I don't remember the actor, but Sandman. And that movie's failures have a lot to do with who the villain is. So I think, yeah, Iron Man also falls into that trend, but I don't think that's Iron Man's fault. I mean, it's Iron Man's fault. Like, you shouldn't have a bad villain, and, you know, you can't just blame someone else for that. But I don't necessarily think the MCU's problem starts with Iron Man. I think the MCU's problem with villains starts in 2002 with the first X-Men movie.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know when you guys have seen those movies recently, so I don't know if you guys could even comment on that. But those are my just, you know, if I were to place a blame on it, I think it's just the superhero genre as a whole is probably not that great with it. So
well, if
I do want to point out that, yeah, maybe as far as like Marvel goes, but Dark Knight came out the same year as Iron Man, and that was like,
that's true.
That had Joker, and everybody thought that was amazing. Like, he was, I would say, the main reason that movie did so well.
Yeah, and if you even go back further to exemplify that point, then you also have Jack Nicholson's Joker. So there is, but then you also, to counter that though, you have like The Riddler by Jim Carrey, and
right.
but to counteract that, you have Danny DeVito's Penguin, which is actually pretty good. So
yeah,
I like that one.
But then you have Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze.
A lot of Batman villains.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of. But if you want to go, then you also have 2005. You had Lex Luthor by Kevin Spacey, and I love. Well, never mind. but that one's not that great either. So, you know, it's a fair mix of good to bad, but it definitely leans bad.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a superhero thing. All their villains suck.
What did you say the box office for Iron Man was?
Iron Man made $585.2 million.
Yeah. I just pulled up Dark Knight, which came out the same year, and they had a budget of $185 million and made $1 billion.
Well, yeah, that's the funny thing about Chris Nolan. He's a good director, makes good movies. So I did forget when I pulled up that list. I actually did forget, and I just remembered when you brought up Joker is like, oh yeah, there are DC movies too. How dare you? How dare you remind me of those 8 movies that aren't The Dark Knight? I hate you for bringing this up. I hope we never do a series of reviewing the DC movies because I cannot sit through Batman versus Superman again. Sorry, Zero. Anyways, that's gonna wrap up this one. Okay. Let's go through the obligatory. Is there a dog barking? Okay, excuse me for the dog barking. Anyways, we'll just go ahead and rank this movie, guys. Let's put it to a vote. Where's this one gonna end up?
1 out of 1, definitely.
All right, I could give it to that one. I was thinking I was gonna have to argue, but that sounds fair enough to me.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to rework
next time.
I don't know how we're gonna do this. We're gonna need to figure out, you know, off screen how to what we're gonna do if we actually do have disagreements. But for now, we are 100% unanimous. Iron Man 1, best Marvel movie so far. With that is going to be this episode of the very first episode of the MCU Ranked review. Every week we review one movie from the entire MCU library, rank them from best to worst. I'm your host, Hoodie. With me, my life partner, Zero. And for the very first time, Kaiser. Welcome to the channel.
Thanks.
All right. See you guys next week.